Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order, but we will not be able to do the business items until one more member of this committee shows up. And so we're going to invite the University of Minnesota to step forward if they're ready and share with us their information.
So, Madam Chair and committee members, I would just to get an introduction, if you will. Back in 2013, this committee approved our grant to the funding to the University of Minnesota for 2 graduate student projects. One was on evaluating high-strength waste for anaerobic digesters, and that was reported back, I'd say, about 2.5 years ago. And this is the second project that is wrapping up that you'll hear about today. I just think it's important when you approve something like this that you get to see the value and the results of what we
happened. I appreciate that, Larry.
Right, thank you, Larry.
Just introduce yourselves, names, and
Sure. Hi, I'm Tim LaPera. I'm a professor in the Department of Civil, Environmental, and Geoengineering.
And I'm Paige Novak. I'm also a professor in the Department of Civil, Environmental, and Geoengineering at the University of Minnesota. Thank you for inviting us.
Looking forward to this. So I want to talk just a little bit first about the importance of wastewater treatment. It does a lot of wonderful things for the world, and the Twin Cities especially. One of the myriad of goals is basically to treat whatever we flush down the toilet so that it can be returned to the environment without harming water quality. And wastewater treatment in the Twin Cities is highly successful. Water quality at the Mississippi River is excellent. I can personally vouch for that by how often I go fishing. Wastewater treatment we use a bunch of technologies to achieve that. About 2/3 of the treatment is achieved by basically bubbling air through water that allows microorganisms to eat the pollutants in the waste, and then we separate out the microbes, and then the waste is clean and ready to go. This bubbling air through wastewater is very energetically expensive. Estimates are 3 to 5% of all electricity used in the developed world is for wastewater treatment. So it's a big energy cost, and it has implications for climate change. Just to give you an idea, this is a photograph of the aeration
What's that number? What percentage?
3 to
5.
5%.
Pay attention, Harry.
Oh, I didn't hear. I don't hear that well, so that's why I asked. I mean, I kind of got it, but
So yeah, it's a big number. And so basically, this is a picture of an empty wastewater treatment tank at Metro. And you can see the diffusers at the bottom of the tank. And so this tank is 10 to 15 feet deep. And when it's full of water, as you can see here, basically it takes a lot of pressure and energy to generate a bubble underneath 10 to 15 feet of water. And then that bubble floats to the top and oxygen gets transferred to the wastewater as it goes. So that's sort of my 5-second snapshot of wastewater treatment. This project specifically dealt with ammonia, which is not a waste that anybody typically dumps down drains, but sewage is largely like food, and so it's got fat, carbohydrate, and protein, and when proteins break down, that releases ammonia. So ammonia ends up being a very important environmental pollutant. From the wastewater treatment perspective, ammonia is probably one of the more difficult challenges for 2 reasons. First of all, it takes a lot of oxygen or air to remediate or treat the ammonia. It's just very expensive. We don't think of it as this, but it's an explosive compound, essentially. You could build bombs with it if you wanted to, and people have, unfortunately. The other reason is the organisms that eat ammonia are very slow growing, and they're very sensitive to any sort of changes in their environment, and so they're very susceptible to upsets. The good news is that ammonia levels are generally regulated in treated wastewater only during the summer months. There's 2 reasons for this. One is it's very difficult to deal with it during the winter, and 2, the environmental impacts of ammonia in winter are much less. Because the environmental impacts are much less, MCES is interested in reducing aeration costs in the winter. that would save both on operating costs as well as greenhouse gas emissions. The problem before we started this project, from their perspective, is, well, okay, so we can turn down air when November hits, and then our regulations kick back in April. So when do we turn the air back on? This is a tough question because we have had no ability to measure the organisms that eat ammonia throughout time, basically because they're very slow to grow and they're very hard to grow. The existing assays are not very helpful. So with our research, we used a DNA-based method. This is something similar to what the FBI would use at crime scene forensics, except instead of dealing with blood and human DNA, we're dealing with bacteria and their DNA. The method are highly well developed at this point. They're fairly quick, they're fairly inexpensive, and we can even get data, we think, within a day. So instead of a couple months for data with the old methods, we can get a turnaround time within a couple of hours, maybe 8 hours. Okay. So our goal was to measure the bacteria that eat ammonia at the Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant, where they turn down the air historically. There are 4 quadrants there, so every time you're going to see some of the data that we've generated, you'll see it times 4. And then we compared the results at Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant with those at Blue Lake and Seneca Wastewater Treatment Plants, where the aeration was normal throughout the year. Okay. The goals, we wanted to see if the method could be useful to make informed decisions about how to control aeration. And we wanted to validate the method that is very quick and easy to use with a high throughput DNA sequencing method, which is a complementary method that can also be used to measure the bacteria that eat ammonia, but it's much more expensive and much slower. So this is an example of, or this is the ammonia data. And so you can see, I'll try to use the screen. Essentially what happens with, these are the 4 Metro wastewater treatment plants. This quadrant we didn't have ammonia data for, but you can see that it's pretty good in the summer months, and then it spikes up in the winter and then comes back down. Okay, so let's see. And that's what we were kind of expecting because aeration is turned down. And then if you look at the Seneca and Blue Lake facilities, you can see that treatment quality is always good. The ammonia levels are always really low, regardless of the time of year. Okay. So then this is the data where we measure the bacteria that eat ammonia. So here again are the 4 Metropolitan wastewater treatment plants. In the black circles shown here, and you can see they're all horizontal lines more or less, there's bounce to the data. That's using the same genetic techniques or the DNA-based techniques to measure all bacteria. There are simple methods to do that, but we wanted to do it for comparison. And then these open circles are the bacteria that eat ammonia. And they're about 1% of the total bacteria, typically. And you can see that they bounce around quite a bit, but there's no real difference as a function of season. When you go to the Blue Lake and Seneca wastewater treatment plants, you essentially have the same result. You've got the same total number of bacteria stays about the same. The bacteria that eat the ammonia stay about the same, independent of season. This was very much unexpected. We assumed that when we turned down, or when Metro turned down the air, that the organisms that eat ammonia, and they're not eating ammonia because we can see that because the ammonia levels went up, we assumed that they would slowly die off and go away, but they stick around. We were really worried that this was just some weird artifact with our data. And so this next slide where we compare it to the other method, we would expect there to be a line at that angle where they correlate. And you can see in all 6 cases, the 4 quadrants at Metropolitan and the 2 cases at Seneca and Blue Lake, there's a really nice correlation. So our method was validated. Our new method is validated by the high throughput DNA sequencing method. So what does this mean? It means, first of all, we can quantify these organisms that eat ammonia, which is new, and that's been a tool that's never been available to people operating wastewater treatment plants. What was unexpected was that they don't seem to change in the winter, even though they stop working and they're not as active. The good news about this, the question that was asked originally is, when should Metropolitan turn the air back up? The answer is pretty much whenever, because the organisms that do this job for protecting the environment don't go away. So they're going to be there. And so it should be just a simple situation in which you turn on the air and they get back to work in the spring. So we like the method. It's a generally applicable method. It can quantify the organisms that eat ammonia. It can quantify all the organisms, the total that I've shown you. And it can even be used to quantify other organisms of interest, such as those that help remove phosphorus, which is another pollutant of interest in the wastewater. Or it can be used to quantify some nuisance organisms such as filamentous organisms that make treatment a little bit more difficult. So with that, thank you very much for your attention, and be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So the long and short of it is that if the aeration stays during the year, the ammonia eating microbes would continue working?
Yes, so if air is on, well, let me back up. When it's warm, they work with the air. When it gets cold, they stop working, but they stick around for reasons that we don't quite understand, to be honest with you. But the fact that they do stick around is a very good thing from a practical perspective. We don't need to worry about them going away and turning on the air, a month or two earlier than absolutely necessary, simply to get that function back. Essentially, they're well behaved.
But if you left
microbes.
the air on all winter long, would they be removing ammonia from the?
Yes, they would. That's what I think. There's been some changes, but that's what we observed with Blue Lake and Seneca, which if the air was on, ammonia was removed throughout the year.
So ammonia is not as much of a problem at the Metro, or it's just are we just looking at saving energy because ammonia isn't a problem in the winter?
It's about saving energy and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So in the winter.
And just to add to that, they're regulated, and they've been told that in the winter there's an assimilation ability in the Mississippi River, and so it's not a water quality threat in the winter.
We have a quorum.
Oh, good.
Other questions from the committee? Councilmember Wolf.
Do we have any idea how much energy we would save by turning down the
That's a good question.
bubbling?
I'm sure somebody does, but I'm not that person.
Mr. Rogecki?
So hello, I'm George Strauss. I'm the process engineering manager for
Hi, George.
environmental
Welcome.
services. And I'm afraid I don't have an exact number in my head, and I apologize for that.
I
But
don't
it's very
expect you to have an exact number in your head, just a ballpark.
But this idea of matching the treatment and reducing greenhouse gases during the winter to what we can and saving energy has been in the process for about 8 years or maybe more at Metro, and we have documented the energy savings, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say it went from $3 million a year to $2 million a year. So $1 million a year savings in energy at Metro. Please don't quote me on that.
It's okay.
I will get the graph with the real information, but it was a very substantial savings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Any other questions? So this study's been going on for 1 year, 2 years?
The study went on for 2 years.
2 years. Excellent. And I'm sorry, we don't have your name in. Do you want to give us your name again, Doc?
My name, Paige Novak.
Paige Novak.
Yeah, I'm on the first slide.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
If there are no further questions, we thank you for your work and your studies, and we're glad there are people like you to do it.
All right,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
So now that we have a quorum, the first thing we can do is approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, the agenda has been approved. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Were there any changes or
So moved.
alteration? Thank you. There's been a motion.
Were you here on the 24th?
Was.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes have been approved. We have one business item, 2018-118, and it's the Seneca Polymer contract, and Joseph Ward is going to walk us through that.
So, Madam Chair, I'm going to do my thing again. Wanted to introduce Joe Ward. He's one of our process engineers
Hi, Joe.
responsible for our incineration and solids handling. And Joe's going to be picking up a lot of this contract presentation and, you know, the polymer work and chemistry that I had been doing for all these years. So it's his first time at the committee meeting, so.
Will be nice. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Like Larry said, my name is Joe Ward. I'm a process engineer in the process engineering group and support services under Larry and George. And I'm here to discuss a new polymer contract for Seneca. And just a brief background here. Our polymer is a conditioning chemical, which we add to the sludge as it's fed into the centrifuge at Seneca specifically. And as it's fed in there, it aids in the dewatering process. It helps separate the sludge from the water. So we make the sludge as dry as possible from that point. And for this bid process, we received 2 bids. And then after we received the bids, we did a trial of the different polymers that were submitted to us. And through that process, we determined that Polydyne was the vendor with the lowest bid. And the polymer unit costs ranged from $53 to $57 per dry ton. The contract would be for a period of 2 years, each following that three sequential 1-year extensions as long as the pricing remains agreeable. And the estimated expenditures are $750,000 a year. This action advances the Thrive outcome of stewardship. The public financial resources will be invested efficiently to maintain proper operation of the Metropolitan disposal system. And as a proposed action, the Metropolitan Council authorized its regional administrator to award and execute a contract to Polydyne of Riceboro, Georgia, to provide Clarifloc polymers at a unit price of 85 cents per pound delivered to the Seneca Wastewater Treatment Plant for the period of June 1st, 2018 through May 31st, 2023. And as I mentioned before, this contract would be for a period of 2 years with the option to extend for 3 additional 1-year periods for a total procurement not to exceed $3.75 million. And
Are there
happy to answer any
questions?
questions? Sorry.
Okay, you said that you tested both companies' product. Did you find any difference between them?
Well, we tested 3 products from Polydyne. Unfortunately, through the bidding process, we received another bid from BASF, and their bid was incomplete, unresponsive.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ended up being 3 different products from Polydyne.
Mm-hmm. And were there differences between the products?
Yes, there were.
So how do you decide which one?
What we do is we test the dosage that's required to remove a certain amount of solids with each polymer product,
Mhm.
and then whichever one requires the lowest dosage and multiplied by the price is the winner.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
It makes sense.
It's basically the lowest dosage if you assume they're all the same price. I'm sorry.
The one that does the best job for the lowest cost.
You got, yes.
Okay. If there are no questions from the committee, is there a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You succeeded in your first.
Nice job.
Congratulations. The
Thank
motion
you.
passes.
I had a lot of questions, but I just kept them to myself. Sorry, Ned.
So we still have a quorum, but we finished business. We don't have a quorum.
Simple though.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is budget concepts, and Mr. Smith is going to talk to us about money.
Thank you, Madam Chair and member of the committee. Again, my name is Ned Smith. I am the Director of Finance and Revenue for MCES. I'm here today to talk to you about our proposed 2019 budget and give you an overview of kind of where the budget is now, and then share through how we're going to go out and talk to our customers to get their input. And then the long-term plan is then we'll come back in July, give you their feedback, and then make formal rate recommendations. Starting with our most important slide is our Thrive lens. I was really hoping to bold equity, but I got 7 out of 8, so I feel like we're on a pretty good run. Stewardship, this is primarily about making sure we're taking care of our ratepayer dollars, as well as taking care of our plants and interceptors and equipment. So stewardship is taking care of the ratepayer dollars, and again, taking care of the wastewater treatment system. Prosperity is primarily driven by our low rates. We are some of the cheapest rates in the country, so we feel like if you're living in the area, our rates assure prosperity. Sustainability is in how we operate our business to make sure we are reducing our carbon footprint, as well as taking care of the water in the region and making sure that we're taking good care of our effluent channels. Livability is our efforts to be a good neighbor, both in our plants and in our lift stations, to make sure that there are no unfortunate odors, as well as making sure that our facilities and plant is in good shape and we leave things better than we find them, especially in our capital program. Integration, we do this as a cross-functional effort across all the silos in MCES. And I'm always very grateful for the work of the managers that do work so hard on their budgets in the individual departments. Collaboration, we work hard with our customers to make sure that we are meeting their needs, their expected level of service, as well as their expectations for financial stability. And then accountability is primarily in our customer forums and our workshops, where we go out and share these with the customers to make sure that they know that we are transparent and accountable for how we spend their dollars. So jump to the chase. Big flashing lights, the wastewater charge will go up by 3.5% for 2019. I do want to emphasize that is the regional wastewater charge, so that's the charge across the entire system. Individual cities, however, will experience different rates depending on their flow. The sewer availability charge, because of the prosperity in the region and the ongoing development, is going to stay flat at $2,485 for the 5th year in a row. We haven't increased that since January 1 of 14 or 15. There's a slide. We'll figure it out. Our industrial strength charge is up 3.4%. I do want to emphasize this reflects customer input. We were on a 5-year cycle to phase in the recovery of debt service associated with our industrial treatment. And we got to year 5. You may recall seeing increases for industrial in the 7, 8, even 11%. And we felt like we were proposing a 5.4%. And we asked the customers, we're in year 5, do you want to eat it all at once, or do you want to take that final chunk and spread it out over 3 years? And we shared that with them at the industrial forums, and the feedback we got was that they would prefer to spread that out over 3 years. So we're keeping our rates as low as we can based on customer feedback. And then the permit fee also keeping in line with their overall rate increase. The uses, this reflects a 6.1% rate increase over 2018. If you backed out the pass-through grants, it's actually only a 4.7% increase. And most of that is driven by debt service with a little bit of PAYGO. And we'll walk through those details. Just fundamentally to get an understanding for where the majority of the money comes from, looks very similar to years past. 77% does come from the municipal wastewater charge. But sewer availability charge is still a significant piece of revenue for us at 15%. That translates if SAC went away, you'd be looking at about an 18 or 19% increase in the municipal wastewater charges. So we do think it's a great way to manage our affordability and to ensure generational equity. Industrial wastewater charges are about the same at 4%, and then other is also 4%, which is typical with our trends. In uses by category, these pie charts also look somewhat similar. I'll walk through some minor differences. Debt service is still the biggest chunk at 46%, and holding flat, though. That's about where it was last year, and we're happy to see that pretty consistent. Salaries and benefits, the second largest at 22%, and then the other pieces. And I'll walk through them in a little bit more detail. But I always think it's interesting to point out that if you take out debt service and salaries, you've wiped out almost 70%. The operating budget, so the pie chart tells you kind of the magnitude. These lines tell you changes over time. Again, important to draw out that our municipal wastewater charge is up only 3.5%. That was after 3.7% last year. Industrial charges, the increase is slightly lower. That's due more to the trends in the industry. So you saw that our rates were going up 3.5%, but yet our revenue is at a modest increase of 2.2%, and that's because of the volume that we are seeing and projecting. There's also a little bit of drop in there due to IPIP, Industrial Pretreatment Incentive Program. We're expecting one of those to come online this year, and so we do expect slightly less strength charge. The transfer from the SAC fund is up at 5.7%. That is really a factor of how our debt service increases. The actual increases, if the actual revenue will be higher from SAC that we're anticipating, and that will go into the reserve, and I'll walk through some reserve conversations as well. The other interesting thing to point out is in other sources, that looks like the big jump. That is, some of that includes an OPEB adjustment. So as we were investing in OPEB, we had some good returns, and we've also had some favorable estimates from the actuaries. So the OPEB is due for an adjustment, and so some of that money will be coming to us in 2019. We will use that primarily to lower our debt service. But we do expect that for the next 3 or 4 years, so that's great news to help us with our debt. And that also assumes the market continues to do what it does and our retirees continue to do what they do. In terms of expenses, you will see some pretty big swings here, but well, the first one, we have a pretty moderate increase in our labor, and I know if you've been following our labor agreements, they've been higher than 1.6%. This is primarily driven by the employees shifting to cheaper healthcare options. So they have several plans to choose from, and more of them are choosing the one that is cheaper for the council as well as cheaper for them. So that's a great trend for us. So that's primarily what's driving that modest increase in labor, because our headcount is basically flat. Otherwise, you'll notice some pretty big line shifts in contract services, materials, supplies, and capital outlay, and that is due to our specific projects that are embedded in line items for 2018, but they are in a centralized project fund for 2019 in other expense. So what we're doing is when you go to an operator and say, what do you need to do in October of 2019, they can't tell you exactly what they're going to need to do in October of 2019 because it's dependent on the weather, it's dependent on the conditions of the equipment. With asset management, we're trying to be more strategic in how we think about that. But what we are doing is taking known projects and putting them in a centralized location, which is down in other expenses. So we know we're going to do electrical PMs next year. We know there's going to be some vehicle charges. We know there's going to be some chemical charges. In fact, we've actually reduced some of our chemical budgets and put some of that those dollars aside in the centralized fund. The chemical budgets are appropriate if it's a normal year, but if they need more due to weather or other things that are happening, then we'll have that money available for them. But the idea is it allows us to prioritize based on being closer to the year when it's needed, as opposed to baking dollars into budgets, and then we may or may not need them, but now that's sitting in that budget. So this gives us a little bit more control. And this is the second year we've used this method, and it's been very effective for us. In prior years, when we've asked people, what do you need? We've come in with a list of over $11 million above what we could afford from a rate increase. And so this has allowed us to really cut that in half and keep our much more control over how we spend our dollars and making sure that we are partnered with asset management to spend on the priorities that need to be spent. The other things I would call out, you can see debt service is still jumping up about $8 million a year. So we're still working through our debt bubble. I'll walk through that in a minute. And then our PAYGO, we are continuing to increase that $2 million per year. And I'll walk through some of the details of that. The other thing I would point out is that we are going to be using $3 million of our reserve for additional rate relief. And $3 million is worth about 1.5% of a rate increase. And that pretty closely matches what our surplus from 2017. So we try to, when we have a surplus, we try to turn around and bake that back into the next year's budget. So it's customers' money, so we're giving it back. In terms of labor, we do have a slight increase, and that is due to a few additional maintenance schedulers and planners. And the strategy behind that is if we are scheduling and planning more efficiently, we should be able to lower our overtime. And so overtime, it's not quite baked into 2019, but we do expect to see those returns in 2020. Of course, we do have risk factors of attrition rates. We do continue to see retirements. I believe it's slowing a little bit, but there are still a significant number of retirees, as well as healthcare costs if those trends continue or don't continue. In terms of debt service, again, you can see we're up $8 million from 2018 to 2019. Those numbers are going to continue for the next couple of years in the 8 to 10 million per year increase. But we are excited about PAYGO. We are going to increase that another $2 million. And the advantage there is every $1 million of PAYGO saves us at current interest rates about $350,000 in interest expense. Obviously, risk factors to this is capital spending, and this also assumes constant regulation. So this assumes no new material regulations for our plants. So calling out PAYGO, you can see how it's trended over time. We slowed it down during the recession, but now that our revenues are healthy and our operations are healthy, we have been increasing that by $2 million per year. So in addition to the benefit of saving yourself about $360,000 per million in interest, the other benefit is this gives you, as it increases over time, it lowers your debt expense overall, but it also gives you a little bit more of a cushion. So if you find yourself in a bind laying out a year, you can stop that $2 million increase and just hold it flat, and that gives 1% of rate relief. Outstanding debt, we've broken this into two categories. The orange is our existing debt. So that means if you snap the line on January 1 of 2018 and never took out another dime of debt, that's what the orange bars represent. How would our debt profile go down? The blue is assuming that we take on additional debt, which we will as part of our capital program. But you can see overall, we're going to peak out at about 1.3 billion. And then it's going to flatten off. So again, you may recall, we've been in a little bit of there's a debt bubble. Just jump to that. The debt bubble driven mostly by some aggressive rehabilitation done in the teens around our interceptor program. And also some debt smoothing we did during the recession to spread the burden out when we couldn't afford it. So those things are all kind of coming to fruition, but you will see that our debt service is going to flatten off at about 2023. Into 2024, it'll actually go down. And then from there, we anticipate a rise with inflation. This is an old chart, but it's always an oldie but a goodie. We keep this in here because it's a placeholder. We expect to get an update from NACWA. It's an every 3-year survey. We expect to get an update from them in the next couple of weeks, so we'll know where we stand going forward. But we don't anticipate a material change. If anything, our position will probably continue to improve, since in the last 3 years there have been some additional consent decrees against certain cities for their combined sewer separations. So other cities, their debt continues to rise. Ours, we think it'll flatten. So in a per capita perspective, we're, again, one of the lowest in the country. That translates also, same story here. We're going to get a new chart in about 3 weeks, hopefully, maybe 8 weeks, but hopefully by the next time we see you with the rates, we'll have this ready. But we are still in 40% less than the average, which puts us in the bottom quintile for rates. So we're very excited about that. That's our prosperity story there. These are current. This was a separate survey from NACWA, and you can see there was a couple years where we were a little bit higher. This was, again, mostly driven by our capital program and our interceptors. But we are bringing it back down to be more in line with the national average, and we anticipate that these are going to continue to switch. So we've converged, and now we're going to go in opposite directions. We believe we're going to be lower than the nation in the next couple of years, primarily driven by our commitment to our customers to reach a goal of less than 4% for the next, we're on 3 years. We're in year 2 of a 5-year commitment. So if you remember, in 2016 and 17, we were up 5.4% for both years. 2018 was the first year we promised to work to bring it under 4%. We delivered that in 2018, and now 2019 we're at 3.5%. We anticipate we'll continue that, barring an unforeseen circumstance, of still 4% for the next 3 years, and then from there we'll follow inflation. Bringing us to our great story in SAC. The number one highlight was January 1 of 2015. We have not raised our rates since then. And we anticipate we will continue to keep that. We know it'll be flat in 2019. Our projections show, if development continues at a modest pace, less actually than the pace we're experiencing now, we will keep SAC flat until about 2022. So we have good hopes there. That's driven by the recovery. 2016 was nice at about a 2 or 3% increase, and all of a sudden 2017 jumped by 20%. A huge increase. That was driven mostly by apartments. Apartments were up 131% to the prior year. What was interesting was we thought we were done with apartments in 2016, and that was true primarily in Minneapolis, but now we're seeing apartment development across the region. Minneapolis is still a healthy apartment development, but what we've seen is the outside of the core is continuing to grow, as well as St. Paul.
Excuse me, Ned, question here?
Just a comment, Madam Chair. I'm looking at this graph, and I was here in 2009, and I remember thinking, oh, wow, what are we going to do? Will we ever get back to the 20,000 range for SAC? And yay, we're there.
It's nice to have that history. Yes, I can, I was here in 2011, and even then we were wondering if we'll ever get back. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilmember Wolf, because that's a wonderful segue into the Sac Reserve. So that healthy year then bumped our Sac Reserve up to about $78.5 million. We're expecting 82.4. And the question we often get is, isn't that too high? And we purposely extended the timeline to go back in time further to see it's been as high as 97 million, but to show how quickly it can decline. So it pretty much plummeted. If you remember, the crisis in 2009 was actually preceded by 2 years of real estate crisis. The real estate crisis started in 2006, and that's where you can see the numbers started to plummet there. So 82.4 million is healthy, but we are looking to use that in the event of an unforeseen recession.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would point out that some of that decrease from that peak of 97.3 was intentional because there was concerns that if the fund got over $100 million, that it would be rated for other things and be seen as an attractive target. In hindsight, they shouldn't really have been doing that because they needed every bit of that
Reserve,
cushion for later.
Yes, and in fact, we used it for PAYGO. So it was kind of a long-term investment. It did reduce our debt burden for the next 20 years. So just a reminder on our industrial rates, the rest of these standard load charge, industrial load charge, those are for our haulers who haul in waste to our plants or drop it off at our drop-off site in Fridley. That is flat to last year due to we were on a 20-year plan to increase the phase-in of covering administrative costs for those services, and we went back and did a study to determine have we covered our costs, because it was a 17-year-old study at the time, and we deduced that our costs were covered, so we were able to hold that rate flat. And then the others are as written. And then I love pointing this out, the general permit fee is, we're going to keep that flat because it costs us more to reprint all the brochures than the actual additional revenue we collect. So to walk through then our rate setting schedule and how we work with our customers, we started with our industrial workshops back in March and April. We first had one specifically for the liquid waste haulers. Great turnout for that. And then on April 19th and April 24th, we had two separate industrial waste customers for the general permittees. And the reason we had two is because we were overbooked last year, and we were almost overbooked this year for both of those. So we've had over 100, I believe it's over 100 people come through those sessions, and just some fantastic feedback. We tried to do it where we only talk at them for about 20 minutes, and the other 2 hours was interactive discussion, looking at and Bob Nordquist will do a full readout in July when we come back to share all of our customer feedback. But really working to work through some issues. We talked about the new industrial capacity charge that we're working on for process SAC, as well as reporting, some more discussion about strength charge stabilization using a 3-year average to take out the volatility of strength charge. So we had some great discussion there, and Bob will share more of those details in July. May 8th, we're here. And then on May 24th and June 7th, we'll be taking this out to the communities to get their input. We are completely revamping our format here as well. We'll be doing more of a workshop. We're going to have subject matter expert tables all around the room, capital program, I&I, water quality, SAC, general billing, and then as well as the individual rate pay, individual customer sheets. So each city can see how their rate is calculated and what's behind it. And again, we'll be doing a similar format here where we're only going to try to talk at them for about 30 minutes and leave the rest of the time for open discussion. All council members, we love it when council members come to our customer forums. I especially encourage June 7th because we're going out for happy hour after that, so please join us.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What time is the meeting on June 7th? I know I can't make it to the one on May 24th, but the 7th depends on the time.
So it's in the afternoon. Does anyone have that handy? I will keep talking through this, and Susan, I'll keep talking, and then someone will yell it out. So July 10th, we'll come back before the Environment Committee and share the feedback from our customers. At that time, we will propose these formal rates be adopted, and then those will go to the full council on the 25th. And again, that's the approval of the rates, and I believe we have a time.
Madam Chair, the time of that forum is 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. at the Egan Community Center on June 7th.
So I should be able to be there.
Awesome. We've also invited the chair. And then on August 22 is when the rates and the budget get baked into the total council operating budget. And then it goes out for public comment for 2 months with final adoption in December. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Questions, Councilmember McCarthy.
Madam Chair, Ned, just curious about the actual budget, page 6. I understand why you put everything under other expenses, But I just wonder, is this common practice to do something like this? And just because it seems like you don't necessarily see where the money's being spent, or
So, Madam Chair, Councilmember McCarthy, so it is sitting there right now, but as those projects come up, one, the actuals will hit the areas where they are actually being billed, and then we would also move budget. We will move those budget dollars to the budget. What we can provide, though, is we do have some, we know what's in that, what the proposed projects are at this time. The risk is they can change over time as we get closer to the actual year. Some of them are known, like we know we're going to do electrical PMs, but others are, again, dependent on the weather and on the condition of the year. But it is a common practice. I know RA does a similar focus. They hold their departments flat to last year, and then they create a centralized project list where people can ask for, here's the additional dollars that I need.
Councilmember McCarthy.
and another question. I was in the SAC. Where is it? With the different cities, how we rate.
Oh.
Oh, there it is. It's page.
It's not SAC, that's.
I mean the.
Debt per capita.
Yes, debt per capita. Page 13. San Juan, is that San Juan, Puerto Rico? No,
That's-
one more
that's wastewater
page. One more
charges.
page. There we go.
We would have to verify that.
Well, because I was thinking with
It might be different now.
Yeah, that's why I'm curious.
Well, and so I think we'll be at a disadvantage though, because these surveys are done late spring, early summer of 2017 is when the survey was done. So the hurricane hadn't hit yet, I don't think. So probably won't have that baked in.
General Manager has a comment.
Madam Chair, if that is San Juan, Puerto Rico, which I think it probably is, even ahead of the hurricanes, they were having some severe infrastructure problems with not keeping up with rehabilitation, and so they were looking at some inordinate efforts to try and cover their costs to rehabilitate their infrastructure. And then, of course, the hurricane hit and made it even worse.
Councilmember Wolf, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to. I just wanted to say thank you. Fantastic job.
Yeah, I'm going to ditto that. I think especially the beginning of your presentation, all the efforts that are being made to keep the ratepayer increases at their lowest. I really appreciate the care that and the use of the dollars in budget to keep that in line. It's terrific.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and big kudos need to go to Matt Selmeyer. John Atkins, our budget guru, retired at the end of February, and Matt took it on willfully and joyfully. And,
Not willfully.
and did a great job. We delivered a strong budget, and it was through his work. And of course, I need to thank all of the department managers as well, because this is, we have really worked over the last 2 to 3 years to push the budgeting process out. And that's the part of the integration that we're talking about. We're trying to get the individual departments and the facilities and the operator more involved in the budgeting process so that it really is their budget. So they feel like they own it and they understand why the numbers are where they are. I always have more work to help with that, and we're getting there. But again, I'm really grateful for all the work, particularly of my ESAP partners in pushing that message down and getting the involvement and the buy-in.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, we don't have to do any approval other than the kudos, so we should let you get back to your office. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
And the last item on our agenda is the General Manager's report.
I don't have any news that stands out today, other than I did get an email announcing our platinum winners that we'll get in July when they have the conference. So we've got 6 plants again in the platinum category. So
Great.
we'll be celebrating again.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was at the Art Space celebration in Hastings last week, and it's next door to the Hastings plant. But I couldn't remember. I know that it was like third-ish in the country in terms of how long they've been going. What is it?
I think there's only 3 plants above Hastings, if I'm remembering
So it's
correctly.
fourth.
So they're 4th.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, on that happy note, I think we can adjourn.